First one is private property. All right, to me, this is kind of one of those fundamentals um, of America. All right, the idea of our founding fathers were founded on this idea of private property. Back in the 1700s, they didn't want the British taking their property. They didn't want the British telling them what they could and couldn't own, what businesses they could or couldn't have, what products they could or couldn't sell. So the idea of private property is really it's ingrained in our system from the beginning. And as Americans, we love ownership. We love knowing that when I buy it, I own it. Whether it's a Snicker bar, a car, or a house, a piece of land. Right. So as I say there, in that first note there, for markets to operate efficiently, private property rights need to be well defined and actively enforced by laws. So this is where we'll make those connections on the next set of notes. When and where does the government need to be involved? Well, we don't want the government telling us what we can or can't own necessarily all the time, but we do want the government to be there to protect my private property. So if I do buy it, I own it, and I got the laws to back that up. I have the court system to back that up. And that also allows that trust to take place in the markets between a buyer and a seller, that when I go to the store, I'm buying something, I know that that store owned that property, I'm buying it, and now I take ownership of that. So something like an example of like a car title. When you buy a car from someone, you want them to produce that car title to you. If they don't have a car title, they don't have proof that they actually own the car. So if you're buying that car without a title, you gotta be careful. There's some chance that you might not actually own that car. And then there's another example there as far as younger generations are going with music. Right, when I was growing up, it was cassette tapes and CDs. So when you wanted music, you had to go to the store, physically buy the album, and then obviously the money profits went to the store I bought it at. But then all those profits would also work their way back to the artist, the songwriter, the musicians and stuff. Right. So today we are downloading music all the time on the internet. All right. Sometimes we pay for it, sometimes we don't. So there's an idea of private property. When that song that's produced, who owns that song? Is it the songwriter? Is it the the musician, the group? Are they entitled to get some profit from that since they made it? They came up with it. All right, so when we download that music without paying for it, there's a question of private property there. Are you allowed to have ownership of that file, that music file? All right, and maybe if you're just listening to it on your phone or you're just listening to it at home, all right, you say it's not a big deal. I'm not selling it. All right, and that's where the kind of the gray area comes into play. How are you using that music that you're downloading and you're not paying for? The next piece, as far as the fundamentals of our concepts to our American mixed market economy, is limited government involvement. All right, so capitalism is the key word here. Everyone star that term in your notes. Factors of production are privately owned. That's what capitalism is. All right, it's when you and I, the people, own the factors of production. And again, I want to use those terms interchangeably. Factors of production and resources are the same thing. So if you have to put it down here again as a side note, what are our factors of production, or what are our resources? Land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. So in capitalism, which is the basis of our American system, is those things are privately owned. Well, can the government buy a piece of land? Yes. All right, so they can play into this capitalism piece as well. All right, but as far as telling us when and what we can or can't buy, that's where this is the limited government involvement piece really takes place. All right, one of the famous lines from early years of our system was laissez-faire, which is just a term that means leave things alone. We don't necessarily need that involvement. All right, and again, I always reemphasize, I'm a big history buff kind of nerd when it comes to this stuff. I love learning about the founding of our country. Yes, there was some obviously problems at the beginning and it wasn't perfect, but when we look at it from the economic perspective of things, it's really what the country and the economy are built on, is this idea of limited government. And again, it's even a major purpose of the U.S. Constitution, was to limit the power of government by taking that power and spreading it out. All right, so that's why in our Constitution, even looking at it from a government perspective, we have separation of powers. We divide our government into those different branches. All right, we have federalism to break the powers of government down between the federal and the state levels. Those things exist there for a reason, because even when our country was founded, When our government was created, they wanted limited government in all areas, right? Not just when it comes to rights and freedoms, but also economically as well. All right, so we're going to get into this a little more detail in class. We're going to look at the difference between liberal versus conservative views, and looking at when is it good to have the government involved, when is it maybe not. All right, when is too much, when is too little. All right, so we'll have some opinions there, and hopefully we'll get some maybe a little discussion or debate going to understand this a little bit more. All right, the next piece as our fundamental piece is voluntary exchange in the markets. I really look at this as being that idea that, similar to the idea of owning private property, is a very American idea. All right, same with this. It's the idea that you and I are voluntarily making those decisions when we buy something. When you go to the store and you're willing to spend whatever you guys spent on shoes today, a couple $100, all right, that's voluntary. No one's telling you you have to pay the $200 for that new pair of shoes. All right, and that's what voluntary exchange is. We call that free enterprise. It's the exchange of resources and goods for money to take place voluntarily. The government's not saying you have to buy that good. If you remember at the beginning of the semester, we went through that, I read you that excerpt from that book, and we talked about Cuba, how in Cuba you got a booklet of coupons, the libreta, and that libreta of coupons was what told you what you had to buy, or not even buy, what you had to exchange your coupon for, and when and where you had to exchange it. And if you didn't use it on the day on the date on that coupon, you were out of luck. You weren't getting that pair of pants or that pair of shoes. All right, so there's no voluntary exchange there. It's the government saying this is what you get, this is when you get it. All right, and there's little choice in the matter. So the idea of free enterprise and voluntary exchange, another just integral part to our system, our American mixed market economy. All right, allowing the consumers and producers to make those decisions for themselves. And the key, that second point where it says each believe the benefits will outweigh the costs of their exchange, this is, I've said this before in class too, if you're willing to give up that $200 for that pair of shoes, you're identifying that that pair of shoes is worth more to you than the money. So if you're willing to do that, that's voluntary exchange taking place, and you're identifying that you're going to benefit from that exchange. And same thing with the store. Right? The store is saying your money's worth more to them than keeping those shoes on the shelf. So they're willing to give up that pair of shoes in exchange for your money. And that's voluntary exchange. As long as that's taking place, the system can really kind of continue to function in a positive way. All right, our next topic here is competition. All right, competition is an important piece to the fundamental concepts. The way I always think of it is just think of your cell phone. All right, if you think about your cell phone, you love competition. All right, without competition, you wouldn't have the phones you have in front of you, which I'm sure you have on you right now, and I'm sure you've probably even looked at and used during the course of this screencast. So competition does two things. It gives consumers options, gives consumers lower prices. Maybe not so much lower prices with your cell phone, but competition is what's driven Apple and Samsung to compete to get you to buy their product. I've used the example in class before, 5 years ago maybe at the most, when I got my first smartphone, I asked my students in each class period, I took a poll, and the Galaxy at that time was hands down the favorite. If I did that same poll today, I think the iPhone would be hands down the favorite. So that's because of competition, all right? Apple has outdone Samsung maybe over the last couple of years, and you might see it swing back the other way as they compete to come out with better options on their phones. The lower prices, maybe not so much with the cell phones, but with other products. That's usually the best way to get you to buy their product is offering a lower price. So when firms are competing to get you to buy their product, the lower price will oftentimes be that first thing that you look at. All right, but every product's a little different. So maybe it's price, maybe it's options, but that's what competition ultimately helps do for the system. And then the term consumer sovereignty, kind of similar, ties real close with free enterprise. Is consumers are free to purchase what they want. All right, so you and I get to decide what we're producing. All right, we get to decide whether or not we want that product. And this is a very important piece, because if we don't want it, that product's not going to be offered no more to the system. right? Tying back to the limited government involvement, we don't want the government to say, hey, you have to make this product, because we might not want that product. So it's just a waste of resources, all right? Again, our production possibilities tells us if we increase production of one item, we have to decrease production of the other, because all resources are what? Exactly. I bet you just said the word scarce. So since all resources are scarce, we can't have everything being produced. Whether consumer sovereignty is perfect for this, because ultimately we decide what we want to buy, and the stuff we're not buying, it disappears, and then those resources are used to produce the things we want. Here's an example. I found this list of product flops, all right, as they call it. So all right, so here's the first one. These were, I think, made by Google. It was supposed to be like a type of glasses that you can access the internet from. You could do Google searches right from your glasses. Yeah, the Google Glass. That came out in 2013. Obviously, we don't see those around. I like this. It was called Newton. It was the first. I mean, this was Apple back in 1993. So this was like the first. They call it PDA, Personal Digital Assistant. It's like the original iPad to some extent, but the technology just wasn't ready yet to do what probably people wanted to be able to do. So it didn't last very long. I think Apple didn't make much money off it. Didn't have many sales. Again, because people just didn't want it. You have the Atari. How about this? Years back in 2013, Burger King tried coming out with fries that were healthier. People, when you're buying French fries, you aren't buying French fries to be healthy. You're buying French fries. Good. This is what consumer sovereignty ultimately does. It allows those products that are going to be successful to stay out there for sale, and the competition to decide if what other options can we add to it, how can we better this product, and then consumer sovereignty also allows those products that you and I don't want to fail, which is okay. All right, we don't want our resources being used for products that we don't want, because that's just a waste of resources, a waste of efficiency in our system. All right, and the last piece for looking at these fundamental concepts to our American mixed market economy is specialization. So specialization is when market economies encourage efficient use of our resources, and the best way to do that is to specialize in an area. Right? It's just like it says there, you concentrate your efforts in areas that you are best at. I kind of see this as a goal of going to college, a trade school, tech school, getting more training at your job, or learning a new skill or taking a skill you have and ultimately trying to sell it to the highest bidder. That's ultimately what it's about. When you go to college, you're going to get a degree. You're not going to be the only one with that degree. So what sets you apart? How can you show you're more specialized, and you can concentrate your efforts to benefit the business that's going to hire you? Because there's always someone else out there like you. And this is kind of why I look at this is why athletes or someone like Floyd Mayweather can make so much money, and their contracts are hundreds of millions of dollars that they make. Why? Because they specialize in an area that very few people have that type of skill. All right. Obviously, if there's more people with the skill, you can't make as much money on it, because there's more. If I own a business, I can have more options of hiring people, so I can pay them a little less. If there's only one person applying for that job, I'm going to have to shell out the cash for that person if I need them to do the jobs for me. So specialization really is a key piece, maybe even more so on an individual level, to figure out how you can fit in this economic system when it comes to a job someday.